Welcome to Genesis chapter 25. This marks the halfway point in the book of Genesis. It also brings us face to face with one of the most contentious theological issues in all of the Bible. That is the intersection of God's sovereignty and man's responsibility. Let me try to set this up for us. Following the death of Abraham, which is a huge deal actually, the story shifts to the son of promise. That is, it shifts to Isaac. And so after a period of infertility, Isaac and his wife Rebekah are finally able to conceive. While pregnant, Rebekah senses that there is a sort of battle going on within her in her womb. And so she prays, she asks God, and God's answer was that she was carrying twins, with each child representing a future nation. However, these two patriarchs would experience strife. And ultimately, God said that the older one would serve the younger. This last reality was opposite the normal pattern of heredity and succession, for it was the older son who was supposed to inherit a double portion of the family's estate, as well as the role of priest and leader. And so herein we see God's wisdom and sovereignty on display. Before they were born, before, as Romans chapter 9 tell us, they had done anything either good or bad, the Lord chose who would rule. Again, Paul tells us in Romans 9 that this was according to God's purpose of election. In time, these two, Esau and Jacob, would grow and mature into men. One day, as Jacob is cooking a pot of stew, Esau came in from the field. He was exhausted, tired, famished, and he demanded from his brother a portion of food. Jacob, whose name, by the way, means cheater, bargained with him, demanding that Esau give him his birthright in exchange for a meal. Now, we'll come back to the staggering implications of this, but for today, I just want to focus on the fulfillment of God's words to Rebekah. In that moment, Esau became a servant to the younger brother Jacob. It was just as God had said. So here's the question. Was this a matter of God's sovereignty or Esau's responsibility? Well, the answer is yes. Yes to God's sovereignty. Yes to Esau's responsibility. I realize that this is somewhat paradoxical, but in God's economy, it's not. See, in Isaiah chapter 10, the prophet makes a series of profound statements in God's name. So in verse 6, God tells us that he will send the Assyrians against Judah, that the Assyrians will be a, quote, rod of my anger. Here is God's sovereignty on full display. But in the very next verse, God says that the Assyrians do not intend to be God's vehicle of judgment. Rather, they will invade and destroy out of their lust and their pride and just their general wickedness. Herein lies man's responsibility. The point is that God is, in his sovereignty, able and willing to allow, know, and harness evil intent, or the evil intent of mankind, so as to accomplish his good and perfect will. God works in line with our desires. Now, man may be completely unaware of what God is doing, a sort of unwitting partner in the divine plan of redemption. But make no mistake, man is still responsible and will be held accountable. Esau was, the Assyrians were, and you and I will be as well. No one will be able to offer the "God made me do it" excuse as a defense. In sum, then, this points us towards another son. It points us towards the divine Son. It points us to Jesus. For as part of God's plan, Jesus was crucified according to the desires of wicked men. His death and resurrection save us, gives us eternal and life, eternal inheritance, an inheritance that can never be bartered away, lost, or sold. God calls us according to his love and grace, and we respond in faith and belief. Here again is the intersection of God's sovereignty and man's responsibility. May all of you, by faith, accept Jesus and the salvation that he offers.